She had counted the doors. 7 of them. 7 houses where she had stood on the step with snow melting into her boots, and 7 times the door had either stayed shut or opened, just wide enough for someone to look at her and say no. The 8th house was the last one on the mountain. After this, there was nothing. Just trees. Just the road that ended in a wall of pines and a drop so steep that even the deer didn't go down there in winter. Her name was Hannah Coyle. She was 26 years old, and she had been walking off and on for 3 days. I'm going to tell you what happened to her on that mountain. I heard it from her own mouth, sitting at a kitchen table 2 winters later with a cup of coffee going cold in front of her. She told it slow. She kept stopping. Sometimes she'd laugh in the middle of a sentence, not because anything was funny, but because she still couldn't believe she was alive to tell it. So let me start where she started. It was the 2nd week of December. The sky over the Blue Ridge had been the color of wet iron for 4 days straight, the kind of gray that doesn't move, the kind that just sits over the trees like a lid. Hannah was wearing a man's wool coat that was 2 sizes too big for her. Underneath, a thin cotton hoodie, jeans that had gone stiff at the knees from where she'd knelt in the slush. One of her sneakers had a hole near the small toe. She'd stuffed it that morning with a folded gas station napkin, and the napkin had already turned to pulp. She wasn't homeless. Not exactly. She'd had an apartment in Asheville up until October. She'd had a job at a diner up until September. She'd had a boyfriend up until August, and that was where the whole thing had started to come apart, though she didn't know it at the time. What she had now was a backpack, a nylon thing she'd bought at a Walmart in Knoxville for $14. Inside it, 2 t-shirts, a pair of socks she'd washed in a gas station bathroom, a phone charger that had nothing to charge because her phone had died on Tuesday, a half-empty bottle of ibuprofen, and a Ziploc bag with what was left of her money. $43, 2 quarters, a nickel. She had a sister in Tennessee who would have taken her in, but Hannah and her sister hadn't spoken in 4 years, not since the wedding, not since the thing with the toast that everyone pretended hadn't happened. Hannah had picked up the phone twice in the last week to call her, and twice she had put it back down. Pride is a strange thing. It can keep you warm for a while, but it can't keep you warm forever. She had come up the mountain because of a man named Earl. Earl ran a small motel down off the highway, the kind of place with 12 rooms and a vending machine that ate your quarters. Hannah had been staying there for 3 nights, paying $28 a night, watching her money disappear like water through a sieve. On the 4th morning, Earl had knocked on her door and said, gentle but firm, that she needed to either pay for another night or be gone by 11. She had asked him, almost crying, if there was anywhere she could go, anywhere cheap, anywhere a person could sleep without paying. Earl had scratched his neck. He was a heavy man with a gray mustache and eyes that looked like they had seen a lot of women like Hannah pass through. There's folks up the mountain road, he had said. Old-timers. Some of 'em rent out a back room sometimes. Cash, no paperwork, you'd have to ask. How far up? Couple miles, maybe more. Road forks. You take the left fork, you'll see houses. She had thanked him. She had walked out of the motel with her backpack at 10:50 in the morning, and she had started walking up the mountain road at 11. That was Monday. It was now Wednesday afternoon. She had slept the first night in an old church. The door had been unlocked. There was a small foyer where they kept the coats in winter, and she had curled up on the carpet with her backpack as a pillow. She had slept maybe 2 hours total. The wind had screamed against the windows all night. She had thought about God for a while, the way you do when you're sleeping in a church and you have nowhere else to go, and she had decided that she didn't know what she believed anymore. She had stopped praying when her mother died. That had been 6 years ago. The second night had been worse. There was no church. There was a barn on the side of the road, but a dog had come out of it barking before she could even open the door, and she had walked another 2 hours in the dark before she found a little hunting blind off the trail. A wooden box on stilts. She had climbed up the ladder and sat inside it with her knees pulled to her chest and waited for the sun. By Wednesday morning, she had stopped feeling her toes. She had been to 7 houses by then, 7. At the first one, an old woman had opened the door 3 inches and said, "We don't have nothing for you, honey," and closed it before Hannah could even ask. At the second, a man had said his wife was sick, and he couldn't have anyone in the house. At the third, no one had answered, though she had seen a curtain twitch. At the fourth, a young couple had given her a granola bar and a bottle of water and told her, very kindly, that they couldn't take her in. They had a baby. They didn't know her. They were sorry. She had eaten the granola bar walking. She had cried for the first half-mile after that, not because they were unkind, because they had been kind, and it had been the first kindness she'd had in 2 days, and kindness sometimes hurts worse than the cold. The 5th, 6th, and 7th houses had all been some version of no. By the time she reached the 8th, the sun was going down. The shadows under the pines had turned blue. She could see her own breath in front of her face, hanging there for a second before it disappeared. And she was so tired, the kind of tired where you don't even feel scared anymore, you just feel slow. The 8th house was set back from the road. You almost couldn't see it from where she was standing. The driveway was a long curve of dirt and gravel that went uphill through the trees. There was a wooden gate, but it wasn't locked. There was a hand-painted sign nailed to a tree that said in faded red letters, "No trespassing." She stood at the gate for a long time. She read the sign 3 times. She thought about turning around. But behind her, the road went back down the mountain for 2 miles, and there were no more houses between here and the highway, and the sun was already touching the tops of the trees, and her hands had stopped hurting an hour ago, which she was pretty sure was a bad sign. She pushed the gate open. It made a sound like an old man clearing his throat. She started up the driveway. The house, when she finally saw it, was small. It wasn't what she had expected. She had been picturing one of those big lodge-style cabins, the kind with antlers over the door and a porch big enough for 10 rocking chairs. This wasn't that. This was a low, square cabin with a tin roof. The wood was old and dark, almost black with age. There was smoke coming from a stone chimney. A pile of firewood stacked head-high against the side wall. A pickup truck in the yard, an old Ford, the kind from the 70s, with a tarp pulled over the bed. And there was a dog. The dog saw her first. It was sitting on the porch. A big shepherd mix, mostly black, with a white blaze down its chest. It didn't bark. It didn't even stand up. It just turned its head and watched her come up the path with the calm, patient attention of an animal that has nothing to be afraid of. Hannah stopped 20 feet from the porch. "Hey, buddy," she said. Her voice came out thin. "Hey, I'm not gonna hurt you." The dog yawned. She took 3 more steps. The front door of the cabin opened. The man who came out wasn't what she expected either. She had imagined in her head on the walk-up some grizzled old hermit, a man with a beard down to his belt and a shotgun and eyes that didn't like people, the kind of mountain man you see in movies who growls at children and shoots at mailmen. The man on the porch was none of those things. He was tall, probably 6'3", broad through the shoulders but lean. He looked maybe 55, maybe 60. His hair was the color of wet sand, gray at the temples, cut short. He had a beard, but it was trimmed close to the jaw. He was wearing a flannel shirt, dark green and brown work pants, and boots that had been relaced so many times the laces didn't match. He didn't have a gun. He just stood there with one hand on the doorframe and looked at her. Hannah felt her mouth go dry. She had a speech she had been giving at every house. She had practiced it. "I'm sorry to bother you. My name is Hannah. I'm trying to get to my sister's in Knoxville and I ran out of money and I just need somewhere to sleep for one night and I can do work. I can clean. I can chop wood. I can do anything." But she couldn't get the words out. She just stood there in the yard in her too big coat and her wet sneaker, and she opened her mouth and nothing came out. Her chin started to shake, and she thought, oh no, not here, don't do it here. The man on the porch tilted his head a little, like he was reading her. He didn't say, what do you want? He didn't say, who are you asterisk? He didn't say asterisk, can I help you? He said very quietly, come sit by the fire. That was it, that was all. He turned around and went back into the house. He left the door open behind him. The dog stood up stretched and walked inside after him. Hannah stood in the yard with snow on her shoulders and tears running down her face, and she could not move. She told me later that she stood there for almost a full minute. She said it didn't feel like she was choosing whether to go in. It felt like she was choosing whether to believe it had happened at all, whether it was a trick, whether she was hallucinating. She had read once that people who freeze to death sometimes see things at the end. They see warm rooms. They see open doors. They see voices calling them home. But the door stayed open, and the smoke kept coming from the chimney, and after a minute her body just sort of moved on its own. She walked up the 3 wooden steps. The boards creaked. She paused at the door, her hand on the frame, and she looked into the cabin. There was a single room, a wood stove against the far wall glowing orange through its glass front, a small kitchen to the left with a steel sink and a counter and a kettle on a propane burner, a wooden table with 2 chairs, a leather armchair near the stove, a bed in the back corner made neatly, with a green wool blanket folded at the foot. The man was at the kitchen counter. He had his back to her. He was pouring water from the kettle into a tin mug. He didn't turn around. He said, boots off by the door, floor gets slippery. She unlaced her sneakers with fingers that felt like wood. She pulled them off. She set them next to a pair of his work boots, which were enormous next to hers. Her socks were soaked through and had gone gray with grime. She stepped inside. The heat hit her like a wall. He pointed at the armchair without looking at her. Sit. She sat. The chair was old. The leather was cracked in places, and it had been patched on one arm with a piece of duct tape that had gone brown with age, but it was soft, and it was right next to the stove. The heat was coming off the stove in waves, and her face started to hurt almost immediately, the way your face hurts when you come inside from the cold. A good hurt, a reminder that your skin is still alive. The man brought her the tin mug. It's tea, he said. Just the cheap stuff, sugar's on the table if you want it. She took the mug with both hands. It was so hot she almost dropped it. She didn't care. She held it against her chest and let it burn through the wool of her coat. He went back to the kitchen. He started doing something at the counter. She couldn't see what. The dog had lain down on a rug in front of the stove. It was watching her with one eye open, calm. She tried to say thank you. What came out was a noise that wasn't a word, a small, broken sound. The man didn't turn around. He just said over his shoulder, "Drink your tea, you can talk after." She drank her tea. It tasted like regular black tea, the kind you get in a box at the grocery store. He had put a lot of sugar in it without asking. She didn't mind. The first sip went down so hot it hurt. The second one she barely tasted. By the third she was crying again, quietly, into the mug. She had not eaten anything since the granola bar yesterday afternoon. Almost 30 hours. The man set a plate down on the small table next to her chair. It had 2 slices of bread on it, buttered, a wedge of yellow cheese, a small bowl of what looked like stew with a spoon already in it. "Eat slow," he said. "You eat fast, you'll throw it up." He went back to the counter. She ate slow. She had to. Her hand was shaking so much that the first spoonful of stew almost ended up on her lap. The stew was beef and potatoes and carrots in a brown broth that tasted like onions and something else, maybe bay leaf, maybe just salt. It was the best thing she had ever eaten in her life. She knew, even as she was eating it, that she would remember the taste of that stew for the rest of her life. She had 3 spoonfuls. Then she had a bite of bread. Then she had to stop because her stomach hurt. The man saw her stop. "That's good," he said. "Rest a minute, eat more in a bit." He sat down at the table across the room. He had his own mug. He picked up a book that had been lying face down on the table. She couldn't see the title, and started reading it. He didn't ask her anything. That was the thing she kept telling me about later. He didn't ask me anything. Not her name. Not where she was from. Not why she was on his mountain in the snow in December with a $14 backpack. He just let her sit. He just let her eat. He just let her exist in his warm house with his quiet dog and his book and his tin mug of tea, like she was a piece of weather that had blown in and would blow out again when it was ready. She finished the stew 20 minutes later. She finished the bread. She didn't touch the cheese because she had started to feel dizzy. She set the bowl down on the table. She said very softly, "Thank you." The man looked up from his book. He nodded once. He said, "There's a bed in the back. It's mine, but I'll take the floor. You sleep there tonight. We'll figure the rest out in the morning." She tried to argue. She tried to say, "No, please, I can sleep on the floor. I can sleep in the chair. You don't have to do that." But the words came out tangled, and she was so tired she couldn't even finish a sentence. The man stood up. He was very tall in the small room. "Ma'am," he said, and that was the first time he used a word like that, ma'am asterisk, like she was a person worth being polite to. "You've been outside a long time, I can tell. Your hands are still white at the tips. You don't sleep in a real bed tonight, you're gonna feel it tomorrow worse than you already do. The floor's fine for me. I've slept on worse than my own floor." He went to the bed. He pulled back the green wool blanket. The sheets underneath were white. They looked clean. "Bathroom's through that door," he said, pointing. "There's hot water, towels on the hook, take your time." He turned away to give her privacy. Hannah stood up. Her legs almost gave out under her. She put a hand on the back of the armchair to steady herself. She walked very carefully to the bathroom door, and she opened it. The bathroom was tiny. A toilet, a sink, a small shower stall, a clean towel on a hook, a bar of soap on the sink that smelled like pine. She closed the door. She locked it, then unlocked it, then locked it again. She didn't know why. She looked at herself in the small mirror over the sink. She didn't recognize the woman looking back. The woman in the mirror had hollow cheeks and chapped lips and red, raw skin around her nose. Her hair, which she had been so proud of once, was matted at the back where she had slept on it wrong in the hunting blind. There was dirt in the line of her jaw. She had not seen herself in 3 days. She sat down on the toilet with the lid closed, and she put her face in her hands. She didn't cry, she was past crying. She just sat there for a long time and tried to remember who she had been 6 months ago. When she came out of the bathroom, the cabin was dim. He had turned off the overhead light. The only light now came from the wood stove and a small kerosene lamp on the table. The dog was asleep on the rug. The man was sitting in the armchair where she had been, reading his book by the lamp. There was a stack of folded clothes on the foot of the bed, a flannel shirt and a pair of sweatpants and thick wool socks. "They'll be big on you," he said without looking up. "But they're warm. Yours can dry by the stove." She picked up the clothes. They smelled like cedar. "What's your name?" she said, the first real question she had been able to ask him. He looked up. "Wade," he said, "Wade Halloran." "I'm Hannah." "Yeah," he said, and the corner of his mouth lifted just a little. "Figured you had one." He went back to his book. She changed in the bathroom. The sweatpants came up almost to her armpits and she had to roll the waist 3 times. The flannel shirt went down to her knees. She caught herself laughing, a small surprised laugh at her reflection. She had not laughed in so long that the sound of her own voice scared her. She came back out. She walked to the bed. She pulled the green wool blanket up to her chin. The sheets were cold for a second. Then they were the warmest thing she had ever felt. She thought she would have trouble sleeping. She thought she would lie there and stare at the ceiling and wait for the man to do something, because, in her experience, men always did something eventually, and the kind ones did it later than the others, but they all did it in the end. She was asleep in under a minute. She slept for 14 hours. When she woke up, sunlight was coming in through the small window above the kitchen sink. The fire in the wood stove had been built back up. There was a smell in the cabin she couldn't place at first, and then she could. Bacon. Someone was cooking bacon. She sat up slowly. Her whole body ached. Her feet, when she wiggled her toes under the blanket, felt sore but real. She could feel all 10 of them. The man, Wade, was at the kitchen counter with his back to her. The dog was sitting next to him, looking up hopefully. He heard her move. He turned his head a little. "Morning," he said. "Morning. You eat eggs?" "Yes." "Good," he said. "I got eggs." She lay there for another minute. She looked at the rafters. There were dried bunches of something hanging from them, herbs maybe, she couldn't tell. She looked at the wall by the bed. There was a small framed photograph there, 2 people. A younger version of Wade, black hair, no gray, no beard, and a woman with red hair and a wide smile. They were standing in front of a lake. They looked happy in the way people only look in photographs, like they didn't know yet what was coming. Hannah looked away from the photograph. She got up. She folded the green wool blanket neatly at the foot of the bed, the way it had been when she'd come in. She walked over to the table and sat down. Wade put a plate in front of her. 2 eggs scrambled, 3 pieces of bacon, a piece of toast. "Eat," he said. She ate. Halfway through her eggs, she set her fork down. "Why are you doing this?" she said. Wade was at the stove with his back to her. He didn't answer right away. He scraped the pan with a spatula. He turned off the burner. He came over and sat down across from her with his own plate. He looked at her then, really looked at her. He had gray-blue eyes, the color of the sky outside. "My wife," he said. "She used to bring strays home. Cats, dogs, once a goat. Once a girl about your age had run off from a bad situation up in Boone. Stayed with us 2 weeks. He picked up his fork. "Maggie's been gone 11 years now," he said. "I figure if she could still tell me what to do, she'd tell me to open the door." He started eating. Hannah looked at the photograph on the wall. "The red-haired woman," she said. "That's her. She was beautiful." "Yeah," Wade said. He kept eating. "She was." They ate in silence for a while. Then he said, not looking at her, "You don't have to tell me anything. Whatever brought you up that mountain, it's yours. I'm not asking, but if you want to stay another night, you can. There's a back room I don't use. It's small, but it's warm. You can stay till the snow lifts or till you figure out where you're going, whichever comes first." Hannah felt her throat close up. She nodded because she couldn't talk. Wade nodded back. He kept eating. The dog put its head on her foot under the table. Outside, somewhere up the mountain, a crow was calling. The fire in the stove popped once and was quiet. "Eat," he said. She ate. Halfway through her eggs, she set her fork down. "Why are you doing this?" she said. Wade was at the stove with his back to her. He didn't answer right away. He scraped the pan with a spatula. He turned off the burner. He came over and sat down across from her with his own plate. He looked at her then, really looked at her. He had gray-blue eyes, the color of the sky outside. "My wife," he said. "She used to bring strays home. Cats, dogs, once a goat. Once a girl about your age had run off from a bad situation up in Boone. Stayed with us 2 weeks. He picked up his fork. "Maggie's been gone 11 years now," he said. "I figure if she could still tell me what to do, she'd tell me to open the door." He started eating. Hannah looked at the photograph on the wall. "The red-haired woman," she said. "That's her. She was beautiful." "Yeah," Wade said. He kept eating. "She was." They ate in silence for a while. Then he said, not looking at her, "You don't have to tell me anything. Whatever brought you up that mountain, it's yours. I'm not asking, but if you want to stay another night, you can. There's a back room I don't use. It's small, but it's warm. You can stay till the snow lifts or till you figure out where you're going, whichever comes first." Hannah felt her throat close up. She nodded because she couldn't talk. Wade nodded back. He kept eating. The dog put its head on her foot under the table. Outside, somewhere up the mountain, a crow was calling. The fire in the stove popped once and was quiet.